In this video, we're going to cover one mythic gear idea for every brawler that doesn't currently have one, which is all of them except for Jean and Tick. My goal is to make them strong enough to be good a lot of the time, but not so strong that they render the other gears useless. So they should actually be a little bit weaker than star powers. Shelly's is trigger happy. It would make it so that her main attack's unload speed would be increased by 10%. So like she would be able to unload all 3 shots just a little bit faster, which isn't that amazing for her, but it would make her a little bit less vulnerable to high DPS brawlers that get really up close to her, like Leon or Edgar. Nita's is Speedy Bear. This would increase her bear's movement speed by 10%. It would still be a little bit slower than Nita, but faster than a non-upgraded Surge. Colt's is Quick Draw. He would gain a little bit of ammo for every projectile that he hits on an enemy. If all 6 ammo hit from his attack, then he would gain 1/3 of an ammo. So not very much, but it would help him reload just a little bit more. Bull's is Recharge. That was really cringe, sorry. He would recover 300 health for every enemy that he hits with his super. Not an insane amount of health, but helpful since he'd normally be taking damage while he's charging with his super anyway. Jessie's is Enhanced Capacitor. This would make it so that her main attack projectile speed would remain the same after bouncing. Currently, it actually slows down a little bit, so this would make it a little bit harder to dodge her bounce shots, but also not impossible. Brock's is More Fuel. This makes it so the fire that pops up after his attack actually lands would burn for an additional second. This wouldn't likely deal additional damage, but it would give him a little bit more map control for longer. Dynamite's is Demolition Expert. He would heal 200 HP for every dynamite that blows up right next to him. This is very helpful for Dyna Jump or in situations where enemies are a little bit too close to him. Bo's is Bigger Bombs. The blast radius of his mines would increase by 1/3 of a tile. It should still be escapable, but a little bit harder to trip them safely. 8-Bit's is Health Booster. 8-Bit would start recovering health 1.5 seconds faster while inside his super. This is actually worse than Tick's well-oiled star power by half a second, plus he has the additional requirement of having to be close to his super, whereas Tick's star power is actually active all the time. Ems's is Extra Charisma. Ems's super would deal an additional 5% damage per second for every enemy within it. Even with 3 enemies inside, this wouldn't be as good as the damage gear, which deals an additional 20% extra damage. However, this would actually stack with the damage gear and could be used when she's above 50% health. Stu's is Rocket Boost. As long as Stu's health is completely full, his super would knock enemies back like it used to for every single time. It's unlikely to happen very often because he would once again have to have full HP, but it could be really great if Stu could pull it off. Also, if it ends up being too strong, maybe they could make it so that it could only happen once every 2 seconds or something like that. El Primo's is Meteor Drop. This makes it so that his super does an additional 50 to 300 extra damage depending on how far away he jumps. Maximum damage would happen at maximum range. Barley's is Open Late. It makes it so that his super lasts for 1 additional second, and very rarely is this actually going to deal more damage to enemies because that's so much time to run away from his super, but it will give him more control, and it will be useful on heist as well. Poco's is Presto. He gets a 15% speed boost for 5 seconds after using his super. This would only make him as fast as Crow or Mortis, so it's not incredibly overpowered, but you know, a little bit of speed is also always helpful. Rosa's is Super Glove. Her main attack range would increase by 1/3 of a tile while using her super. And honestly, this could be pretty strong for Rosa, but I think it's fine because she's not really the strongest in the moment. Rico's is Flame Shot. His super would light enemies on fire for 1 second for every projectile that hit them, up to 6 projectiles. So like burn damage would just be 50 per second, and that's the maximum of 300 damage. So it's not crazy strong, but it would help light them up in bushes or prevent them from healing up over time. Daryl's is Reroll. Each brawler hit with his super would recharge his super by 15%. So if you hit a brawler twice, his super would already be recharged 30%. And honestly, more supercharge is just more fun for Daryl. Penny is Cannon Repair. Her cannon would actually heal itself 100 HP every time it hits an enemy with a cannonball. Penny's turret is pretty easy to dodge if you're paying attention, so I don't think this would be too strong in competitive play, but when you do actually get it, it would be useful. Carl's is Flaming Spin, and this would actually destroy bushes when he uses his super on bushes. It's not a huge buff, but it could be useful on maps with lots of bushes to counter brawlers who rely on them to hide. Jackie's is Groundbreaker. Her super would actually stun for half of a second if an enemy would actually get pulled into a wall. This would add a little bit more power to her super and give enemies even more reason to stay back away from walls, since Jackie could let off a couple of attacks off against a stunned enemy. Gus's is is Friendly Ghost. For each ghost on the battlefield, Gus's total health, maximum health, would increase by 200 HP. So with a maximum of 10 ghosts on the ground, that's a total of 2,000 extra HP, which is actually pretty insane. Most of the time, players don't leave ghosts on the ground. They want to get that extra healing. So like 2 or 3 of them being up there at a time is solid. So I think that's fair. Piper's is Cupcake Surprise. Her bombs have a bigger blast radius by 1/3 of a tile. Most of the time, this wouldn't really impact things, but every now and then it should catch an enemy off guard. Pam's is Happy Hug, and this would increase the healing from all of her sources by 10%. Honestly, Pam's healing just falls a little bit short compared to Poco's and Byron's healing because they're a little bit more versatile, and this should make her a super just a little bit more viable. Frank's gadget is Hollow Hammer. This would decrease the delay from his attack and his super by 10%, making the wind up a little bit faster. Honestly, this could be just ridiculously OP or maybe not very good at all, but I like the idea of making it just a little bit easier for Frank to hit enemies that are close to him. BB's is Spiked Bat. Her home run bat no longer knocks enemies back, but adds 400 damage to enemies that get hit by it. Sometimes you don't even want the knockback, so this is good, but other times you do want the knockback. So this is kind of an interesting trade-off that might be great and might be bad depending on the situation. Bee's Mythic Gear idea is Angry Bees. Her regular attack would deal 200 more damage, so it would go from 1,200 to 1,400 damage at max level, but this buff would not apply to her supercharged shot. So instead of relying so much on her supercharged shot, she could use her regular attack a little bit more. Nani's is Supercell Battery. Peep can travel for 5 more seconds, but this would not increase the flight speed of her super, nor would it increase the damage from her autofocus star power. Honestly, Nani's super is very difficult to control near max time as it is, so this might not even be very useful, but it might give you an additional shot at hitting somebody if you miss them on the first try. Edgar's is Long Jump. This would increase his super range by 1 tile. It would give Edgar just a little bit more range to land, although I'm not sure how frequently that'd be useful because more so playing him is about when you jump and not how close you are to jump, right? Griff's is Big Mint. This would make it so that the first row of coins in his attack would deal an extra 500 damage each for a potential of 150 extra damage at close range for every attack. This, honestly, it just might be a little bit too much of a buff to Griff, but if it's too much, Supercell could always tone it down a bit. Grom's is Heavy Explosives. This makes it so that Grom's super can go through 1 extra wall. So this would allow him to hit enemies behind walls since the first wall wouldn't completely soak up his super. Also, Grom usually doesn't like to break walls because he's a thrower and he likes to hide behind them, so it could also hurt him if you're not being very careful. Bonnie's is Extra Gunpowder. This gear makes it so that Bonnie knocks enemies back when she's climbing into her cannon. Since she's often in melee range when her cannon is ready for jumping into, this would give her a little bit more safety as she climbs in and regains that health. Mortis's is Pre-Swing. This makes it so that Mortis can start charging up his long dash once he has 2 ammo loaded, instead of needing to wait until he's fully reloaded with 3 ammo. This means he'll spend less time like hiding or falling back while he waits for his long dash to charge up, and he'll still have 1 dash that he can use while he's waiting for it to charge. So like he's gonna get extra speed, he can use that to deal a little bit of damage and then long dash away, or there's a lot of different things you can do with it. Terra's is Blacker Hole. This would make it so that her explosion would deal an additional 400 damage. So at max level, the damage would be 1,600 from her super, which would help Terra finish off a few more brawlers with her super. Max's is Time Continuum. This would increase her super duration by 2 seconds, but it would decrease it by 1 second for each teammate that is affected by it. So if she has 2 teammates, then her super would actually be exactly the same. So like there's not very much difference except for the times when you're using it solo or if you're using it with just 1 teammate. Mr. P's is Experienced Bellhop. This makes it so that his porters would spawn 1 second faster every single time, and this would make his super a bit stronger, but would also require that enemies would deal with the spawner sooner than later. Sprouts is Poison Ivy. Sprouts walls would poison enemies that touch it. They would take 100 damage per second, but as soon as they go away from it, the poison would go away. Very easy for the enemy to play around, but also requires the enemy to stay away from Sprouts walls, which adds some interesting complications to things. Byron's is Super Potion. Byron's super heals an additional 600 health when he uses it on his teammates and himself. I've often felt like Byron's super is typically best used offensively, and this would add a little bit of benefit to using it on defense. Squeak's is Sticky Feet. This makes it so the Squeak becomes immune to pulls or knockbacks. Honestly, I don't know if this is super strong, and it might not be good very often, but it would be a good counter to certain brawlers, and also in Brawl Ball, so I like this concept. Spikes is I'm a real cactus. Enemies would take 500 damage whenever they get within one tile of spike. It's not typically a good idea to touch a cactus, and this would remind people of that. Also, is he a real cactus? Crow's super is called Swoop, and his gear would be called Swoop. His super would keep enemies poisoned for 1 additional second longer. This isn't a ton of extra damage, but it would prevent enemies from healing, which can have a significant impact. Leon's is Heavy Cloak, and honestly, this might be a little bit too strong, but let me know what you guys think. This makes it so that damage below 500 does not reveal Leon while he's using his super. There are only a few brawlers who even have projectiles that deal less than 500 damage at maximum level, so most of the time this wouldn't impact things, but against enemies that poison, his invisibility might still be pretty great. Sandy's is Soft Sand. Sandy would heal himself and friendly brawlers for 500 HP if his super lands on them. This isn't a ton of health, and it would only happen once per super, but it could help that a teammate survive a sticky situation as they then use the invisibility to fall back, right? Amber's is Bellows, and it makes it so that her fire travels 25% faster across oil, making it harder for enemies to escape the flame, even when Amber does light it on fire from a distance away. Meg's is Health Zap. This makes it so that her mecha recovers 1,000 health for every brawler that it hits with the mecha's Saber super. 1,000 health honestly sounds like a lot, and it might be too much, but it's temporary health, so I think it's pretty fair, especially considering the fact that most people stay very far away from Meg once she's in her robot. Gale's is Tailwind. Many of you will remember this from his old star power. This would boost teammate movement speed by 20% for 5 seconds if they get hit by Gale's super. Like I said, this was a star power in the past. I've given it a buff since then, so hopefully it would actually be useful, but also not too strong. Surge's is Super Shield. This makes it so that Surge receives a temporary shield of 400 HP after upgrading that decreases over time, like some other shields that are in the game. This is great for when Surge wants to use his super offensively, or when he wants to run away with it to try and escape some enemies. Colette's is Minimum Tax, and this would increase her minimum damage by 250 damage. So at max level, it would increase from 750 to 1,000. And I like this because it makes her slightly better against low HP brawlers without impacting every interaction with every brawler in the game. Lou's Mythic Gear idea is Ice Pop. Enemies would take 300 damage anytime they become completely frozen. This gives him just a little bit more value to his super and his mechanics and makes him just a little bit more useful. Ruff's is Persevere. Up to 10 power-ups could remain on the battlefield at once. This would make it so that Ruff's almost always gets value whenever he charges up his super because it's less wasteful to use his super if there's already one on the field, and also he has a backup if he or a teammate ends up actually dying. Belle's is Quad Bounce. This makes it so that her main attack bounces 1 additional time. Against skilled players, this is not going to do very much, but it's a little punishing for those few situations where enemies do stay clumped up together. Buzz's gear idea is Resuscitate. His super would actually heal enemies for 500 HP, but they would get stunned for an additional 0.5 seconds. I think this is like a funny trade-off, and I think that it's better for Buzz, especially if the enemy is already at max health, right? But I think it's kind of funny to think of Buzz stunning someone because he tried to resuscitate them. It's just funny. Ash's is Grudge. His rage bar would decrease 20% slower. This might need a little bit of a nerf. I'm not sure how strong this is going to be, but I like the idea of Ash's rage bar being able to last a little bit longer so that he has a little bit more time to fall back and heal if needed. Lola's is And Action. And this makes it so that the minimum damage from her super would increase by 10% if she's standing too close to her shadow. You know how she deals less damage if she's too close to her shadow? That minimum amount would actually increase 10%. Fang's is Spin Kick. Fang would now be able to hit more than one enemy with his attack, but the damage is reduced by 30% if he hits more than one enemy. So this would still be more damage overall if he hit more than one enemy, but then he'd be less likely to take either one of the enemies out. Eve's is Thick Shell. Hatchlings lose 50% less health every second when they are out of their eggs. This shouldn't affect things too much for her, but it would allow her to throw her super a little bit further back, possibly eat up a little bit more ammo from the enemies. Janet's is Blast Off. This would knock enemies back whenever she took off with her super and would deal 300 damage to them. I can't think of a situation where this would be too strong, but the knockback could at least be useful in Brawl Ball, and if anything, there's that additional damage, which is nice. Otis's is Star Bounce. His super could now bounce off of walls like Rico's attack can. This would allow Otis to hit his super more frequently, although it might be harder for him to actually follow through because the enemies would most likely be safe hidden behind a wall. Sam's is Cardio. The speed boost from Sam's super would last an extra second. This would give him just a little bit more time to catch up to enemies or even try to escape them if needed. Finally, we've got Buster, and his is Room for More. The ring around Buster that charges his super when teammates are close by would get a radius buff of 2/3 tiles. This way he wouldn't have to stay too close to teammates and still be able to automatically charge his super. And there you have one Mythic Gear idea for every brawler in the game. I'm actually gonna send this to Supercell. I don't know if they'll watch it or not, but if they do, they might add some of these into the game. So let me know in the comment section below which you like the most and which ones you would like added. Obviously with no guarantees. Subscribe for more awesome Brawl Stars content in the future and use code Kairos in Brawl Stars shop to support this channel. There's also these awesome Brawl Stars videos right here. And for now, this is KairosTime ticking by, and we will see you in Brawl Stars.